Hey, this is Tiqqle, and in this video we're going to talk about Enhanced Shaman damage rotation. A lot of you have been coming to the stream, you've been saying things like, Tiqqle, what's going on with the enhanced rotation? It feels like I have so many free globals, I don't have any buttons to press, or, I'm not doing as much damage as I'm seeing other people do, or I'm lagging behind. Is Enhanced Shaman in a bad place? And so what I want to go over is how to do damage as an Enhancement Shaman, and some tips for you for single target, for AOE, particularly when you're talking about when you're going to be in Raid or when you're in Mythic Plus, or Mythic's what we're doing right now. Now, the main thing is I'll go over the builds, then we're going to go over what buttons do you press and in what order do you press. Enhanced Shaman is the most changed class going into Shadowlands, so I don't feel bad. Or don't feel, it's probably frustrating, but don't feel too upset. This is something that everyone is getting used to. And so we're going to go over it. This will be more of a starter's guide on how to get there. Maybe there'll be some tips for you if you're more experienced enhanced that might help you out. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Now, next, the build. Elemental Blast, like I mentioned, that's what we're going to be using as a spender. We're going to be using Storm Flurry for the first build. And like I mentioned, we have a few builds we'll go over. One is for single target, one's for AoE. And then I have another build that I've come up with that might help those people that are having trouble with single target and keeping their rotation flowing, whether it has to do with low haste or just kind of comfort with the spec. Now, that's that. Elemental Assault, this is critical to single target. Stormstrike damage is increased by 15%, but this is really the key. The Stormstrike now generates one stack of Maelstrom Weapon. This is huge because every time you Stormstrike, you're going to get Maelstrom Weapon generation. As you get that generation, it's going to give you more spenders, so there's more rotation going on. I also am going Sunder, and I really want to go Earthen Spike. This will help me in terms of having globals and being able to use them. The other one you can go is Elemental Assault, Elemental Spirits in Mythics and Dungeons. This will this will reduce the cooldown of Feral Spirits, which will give you more Maelstrom generation. And sometimes those wolves, as they come out, they can be different buffs. Those buffs can buff your Hailstorm or other AoE things or single target things. But I recommend if you're just starting out, or even right now, my sim says Earthen Spike's the best, and I always took this for the raid, Mythic raid test when it was out in the beta. I recommend going this build. So then what is the rotation? Well, I want to break it down similar to how I've done it in my previous video, is really 3 steps. Number 1, you want to focus on and I've changed my keybinds just for this video. You want to focus on your melee buttons. Your melee buttons are your Stormstrike, Lava Lash, Crash Lightning. These all have a chance to reset the cooldown on Stormstrike. None of your other abilities can do that. Shocks don't do that. Lightning Bolt and Ollie Blast, Chain Lightning don't do that. These are your number 1 things you want to put on cooldown, right? And by the way, all the cooldowns of these abilities do scale off haste, so keep that in mind. But you want to do Stormstrike, Lava Lash, Crash. You want to keep those on cooldown. The next bucket of abilities you want to use are your spenders. This is where you're going to use Elemental Blast on single target or Lightning Bolt if that's on cooldown. You only want to use those if you're like 6, 7 plus on your Maelstrom weapon cap, which goes to 10, which will consume 5 of those stacks as an instant cast. After that, you can use your Flame Shock, Frost Shock. I recommend in single target, and thanks to chat, you want to keep your Flame Shocks up as much as you can on the target, and then fill with the the Frost Shocks after that. Now, let's go ahead and just see what that looks like, okay? And now, melee abilities, spenders, shocks. The shocks, Frost Shock, can be used before the spenders. I know there was some back and forth with me and some people on the Discord about that, but let's go ahead and see what it looks like in general. The things you want to do as you're getting ready to start your rotation. Drop Wind Fury. That affects you. It sure does. You also can open up with your Feral Wolves. This will help you in single target get a leg up. So let's go ahead and do that. And by the way, I'm not using any other cooldowns. I'm not going to use... I can use Sunder as a fill-in global or just, as damage. Or I can use Chain Harvest, which is another spender, which I could use over Alley Blast. But for now, we'll just use Earthen Spike and avoid the other ones. So we'll drop Wind Fury. We'll open with... Flame Shock, and then I'll go ahead and start good in there. I'm going to use Stormstrike, Lava Lash, okay, and now you can see I have more than 5. I'm going to use Crash, Stormstrike's back, I'll use Stormstrike. I have a Spender to use because I'm at 10, I don't ever want to be at 10. I'd use Ellie Blast. Let's say all my melee buttons were on cooldown, I'd use a Shock. Frost Shock is something where you guys have to get comfortable that you're going to be using that for direct damage, okay? So if I back up again, I'll not go half speed. I'll go full, that was kind of half speed, right? I want to use all my melees. If I get above 7 Maelstrom, use a Spender, Frost Shocks, right? Or Flame Shock. So let's do it again. Ready? Flame Shock going in. I'm going to go ahead and Stormstrike, Lava Lash, Crash. I'm going to use Earthen Spike. I'm going to use Frost Shock. My Stormstrike's back. I use that. Now I can use a Spender. Elemental Blast, Crash, Frost Shock as a filler. Now my Stormstrike's back. Oh, another Stormstrike. Lava Lash time. I want to use Lightning Bolt as a Spender. Maybe Frost Shock. Then I'm back to crashing to Stormstrike. Then I have enough Maelstrom to use another one, so I can use another cast. Maybe Frost Shock, Lava Lash, Stormstrike. Okay, so I was a little bit slower there. So let's go kind of full speed here, and I don't have the wolves to kind of kickstart me either, but that's how it goes. Okay, I'm going to do it one more time. Ready? Flame Shock. You want to do Stormstrike, Lava Lash, Stormstrike, Crash. I'll use a Shock here because I could. I'm going to Earthen Spike into Elemental Blast, Stormstrike. Now Frost Shock, Lava Lash, Stormstrike, Crash, Lightning Bolt, Frost Shock. Now here I might have see, like right there, that was a good example. There I did have a global where I don't have a button to press. And you might see me staring at my bars. I've changed my keybinds around to put them all in this kind of quadrant. I have a different keybind video below in case you're curious about that. And I'm also trying to angle myself so I don't cleave off the raid target there with my Storm Strikes. But you might have seen that I had a global there to use. And I didn't have a Shock. I didn't have a Spender. I didn't have any of my melee buttons. I didn't have Earthen Spike. I could have pressed Sunder, but I probably would have already spent that already. What can I do in that global? And yeah, I think while we have lower haste, while we're below 20%, we're going to run into that those times. I think that was the only time it's happened so far. But that is where I could redrop, Wind Fury. I could drop a Healing Stream Totem. I could drop, do something else that's a little bit utility. Use my Racial. I could use, and there are buttons to be able that you can press without kind of going overboard or going overboard, right? I don't think that as an enhanced playstyle, you don't want to go in there, and if I have all my other cooldowns available, I don't want to be using my other cooldowns necessarily right away. Like, I like spreading them out because it makes the rotation a little bit smoother. What do I mean by that? Well, on the opener, I could Sunder right away, but why would I do that? I'd rather use my melee abilities and even my Shock than Sunder, and then use that as a way to get back to my other abilities. Or use Earthen Spike like that. I'll use Earthen Spike on the opener, and I'll go kind of full speed here. So if I really wanted to go full speed, I want to use all my abilities here, it would look something like this. Ready? So I open with Wolves and Flame Shock. I'd Strike. I'm going to use Earthen Spike to get more damage. Strike. I'm going to use my melee abilities, get them on cooldown. I'm over capping, so that's bad. I use Elemental Blast to spend. Stormstrike's up. Now I could use Chain Harvest, right? Now I'm using my other abilities. All my melee abilities are on cooldown, so I use Frost Shock. Now I'm back. I use a Lightning Bolt here. Now here's a free global. Repress Wind Fury Totem, for example, which is fine. I'm going to use my Shock. I'm going to use Elemental Blast, Stormstrike, Stormstrike, Frost Shock. Then I'll use the Spender to kind of save me some time. I think that's one of the things you'll have to get used to, is you have to get the flow down of, oh, do I want to save my Maelstrom to use that global in a second? Okay, let's put Frost Shock on cooldown first. So there's a flow there. And I was also Frost Shocking way more than I should have. I wasn't keeping track of the Flame Shock. But that's mostly hopefully because I'm just talking and multitasking. So that's what I would say. I wanted to do a quick kind of focus on the single target. People are definitely struggling with this, but I wanted to show you that it is... I did not feel any gaps there. Maybe I had one global to press Wind Fury, but other than that, there shouldn't be too much issue. And I hope that this helps. And if there's any way I can help further, let me know. Now, let me go ahead and show you what that looks like if I use the Unuse. I'll use this Unuse trinket. It'll increase my haste by 20%, and you'll see a little bit of a difference there. So, this is where I think that we're going to get to once we get to the raid time, once people have a little bit more command on their gear and not just going for item level and agility. So let's go ahead and jump into that, okay? So let's go ahead. I'm going to rebuff. Right, I'm good to go. I'm going to walk in there. I'll use Wolves in a second when they come back up, but let's go ahead and just start. Ready? Wind Fury. I'm going to Flame Shock, walk up, and I'm going to pop it, right? So I'm going to Earthen Spike. I'm going to... Okay, there you go. Stormstrike. I'm going to spend on Chain Harvest, Frost Shocking, Crash. I'm filling with other globals. Another one. I'm gonna use my Spender, a Frost Shock, a Crash. Right? So I didn't even use that right, so I'll use that. Flame Shock needs to go back up. We're gonna generate a lot of Maelstrom here. We need to be careful of that, right? So let's spend. Use our Stormstrike, our Frost Shock, because Flame Shock's up, Stormstrike, a Spender. right? So now here's another free global. So I could use my racial or something like that, but that's only kind of few and far between. And that's even with, I went back down to a 12% haste, but what you'll see is that once you get more haste, you'll get more procs of all your cooldowns will be reduced, number one, of all your melee abilities, as well as you'll get more procs because you're getting more damage out. You're also getting more melees going on. The other thing to mention is that if you go Unruly Winds will also proc more Wind Furies, which give you more chance to get those resets. So these are all kind of things that are stacking up, as well as Chill to the Core. This is another one that could give you more Maelstrom stacks with Frost Shocking. So there's a lot of tools here, but this is the single target build that I think is best right now. Now, if you want to go something that's a little bit different, this is the alternate spec that you could go. One is with Hot Hand or one is with Ice Strike. So the reason I would say Hot Hand, you could try to this. I actually think that will put out decent damage. Ice Strike is a little bit more ballsy and another button to press, which I think is a kind of a risky business. So in this case, I'm going to do the same exact rotation. The only difference will be that I'm going to be getting Hot Hand procs, but only sometimes, right? When I get Hot Hand procs, it's a 5% chance. So realistically, you know, like you'll see it won't happen all the time, right? I haven't gotten a single one yet, and this is why it's so RNG. It might help, but in reality, it's going to be kind of a gamble. It'll reset the Lava Lash, and it'll kind of reduce the cooldown, so it'll get that going. So I haven't gotten a single time, but if you're in a dungeon, oh, there you got it. I procced, you know, so I can use my other buttons. It reduces the cooldown, so I can want to prioritize that now. You know, so that is actually doing a lot of damage. Okay, so that's a way you can fill it, though it is RNG based. Now, I want to give you another build that might help. You can go, let's go into specializations. You can go Ice Strike, and I don't necessarily recommend this, but if you're having trouble, it could help you with filling in the global. So what does Ice Strike do? Well, first of all, it just does damage, right? But it also resets the cooldown on your shocks. So this, you know, is I'm gonna use Frost Shock, and then I can reset it with Ice Strike, and then Frost Shock again. This is giving me more global. So let's go ahead and see what that will look like. The only thing I'll do is instead of after I use shocks, I'll reactively use Ice Strike, and I'll probably do that before I use spenders now. Flame Shock as always. Going in Stormstrike, so I want to get my melees on cooldown, right? Okay. My Frost Shock's back, so I'm gonna use Frost Shock. Now I'm gonna use Ice Strike. Now I have Stormstrike up, so I'm gonna use that instead. I use Crash. I use another Frost Shock. I'll spend with Elemental Blast, and I'll go back to using my melee abilities. Frost Shock's back. I use Sunder, Crash. Now I'll wait like a second. I would use a different ability, and I'll wait for that Frost Shock to reset, and then I'll reset it with Ice Strike. Frost Shock again. So I'm hoping that this is helping, but I don't think this is necessarily gonna be the play. I don't think that. I mean, if you want to fill it, you know, your rotation with another ability, I think it could help you, but I don't think this will necessarily be the go-to move. Storm Flurry, I think, in itself will make things a lot smoother once we get a bit more haste. But yeah, those are the alternate specs I want to give you for single target. So if you're struggling, or maybe you're like, I don't know, this just feels like I don't have enough things going on, then Hot Hand for procs or Ice Strike for additional globals. Now, I'm not saying that this will do the most damage. I'm saying for playstyle, maybe you'll find that you like that a little bit more. So maybe give that a go. So that's it for single target. That's really the crux of I think where people are having some issues. Now let's talk about AOE. AOE is pretty fun and pretty awesome, I gotta say. AOE, which is gonna be majority of Mythic Pluses, right, except for the bosses, is pretty epic. I think it's really fun, and the reason for that is because of the animations and the kind of the speed of this rotation. So here, the key is this. Again, you want to be using your melee abilities, but you want to lead with with Crash Lightnings. Why? Because Crash Lightning makes your Storm Strike do damage in front of you, a cleaving damage to all targets in front, and your Lava Lash to do the same thing. It's not Storm Striking all the targets, it's just doing that frontal cone damage. Now, how does it, so what's the deal? So, okay, well, if we go into here, you know, that's really the main thing you want to start with, right? Is you want to be Crash Lightning, then Storm Strike, Lava Lashing, right? Storm Strike will be reset a lot of the times, and that's the way you want to kind of get the ball rolling with your melee abilities. Now, for your spenders and your shocks, what you want to be doing is you want to be spending your Maelstrom on Chain Lightning. Chain Lightning will reduce the cooldown on Crash Lightning, synergizing well, but it'll also give you this buff for Hailstorm. Hailstorm will do a lot of damage, and basically if you spend your Maelstrom, even on a heal, it will then buff your next Frost Shock to hit 5 targets in front of you if you consume 5 Maelstrom, and do plus 15% damage for each of the Maelstrom weapon stacks, increasing it by 75. So let's go ahead, see how that works. So I want to be focusing on getting my Chain Lightnings out, then my Frost Shocks. Chain Lightnings out, Frost Shocks, as well as my Storm Strikes with cleaving with Crash. So let's see what it looks like, right? So melee Crash, I'm going to put my Wind Fury down. Now I'm going to do Storm Strike, Lava Lash. Now I have a lot of Maelstrom stacks. Let's go ahead and use Chain Lightning. Then I'm going to use Hailstorm. You saw it. You saw it. I'm going to use Crash, Storm Strike, Chain Lightning, Frost Shock, right? Okay, Crash, Storm Strike, Chain Lightning, Hailstorm, Crash. Now I don't have a button. I'll use Sunder here. Now I'm going to use Storm Strike, Chain Lightning, Frost Shock. I have a Crash for a Lava Lash. I have a Storm Strike. I have another Chain Lightning. Then I have a Hailstorm. I have a Crash. I'm going to use Chain Harvest here. When I use Chain Harvest, it still gives me that plus 75% damage. And then I'll use the Frost Shock. There's a lot of synergy going on between the Crashes, Crash Lightning and Storm Strike, which gets buffed by every target hit. And then you get the benefit of Chain Lightning, reducing Crash Lightning's cooldown, as well as that Chain Lightning buffing your Frost Shock to be a cleave. That is an extremely satisfying rotation, and I don't think there's any gaps in this. Unless you make a mistake. If you mess up the rotation for an Enhanced Shaman anywhere, you get punished by not having buttons to press. If you spend Maelstrom too readily, like if I spent Maelstrom here, and then I forgot that I had a Hailstorm and I spent it again, now I'm going to be in kind of like a, oh, now I don't have any spenders available. So you get punished, like I have nothing to spend it on. And so that's basically punishment for messing up the rotation. So I would just be careful of that, because maybe that's something that you might do. The other recommendation I have for this AoE situation is you definitely want to get a weak aura that shows your Hailstorm. I have a basic one. I'm also using Luxthos's PvE setup. In PvE, I'll use my own thing, but for PvE, I'll use his. For PvP, I'll use my own. But this is what I recommend. You need to be tracking your Maelstrom weapon stacks and your Hailstorm buff when you get it. Those are the most important things that you will do. Okay, so that's AoE. The only other AoE build is using Elemental Assault. And by the way, and people are saying, why are you taking Elemental Blast with the AoE? You can go Forceful Winds here because of the cleave. You're not going to be pressing Elemental Blast as much. You're always going to be cleaving so much. I mean, if you wanted to have some more single target damage in the build mixed in, you could go LA Blast, but that's okay. Now, if I wanted to not go Hailstorm and I wanted to go Elemental Assault, this is also acceptable. Why? Because Elemental Assault is going to build so much Maelstrom because I'm Storm Striking, you know, and cleaving with it. So let's see. Already, I'll do the same thing, except I don't need to Frost Shock after the Chain Lightnings as much, but that's going to look very similar, and it's going to give you a lot of Maelstrom generation. So I'll Crash. I'll Storm Strike once. I'm up to 5 Maelstrom weapon already. Okay, so then I'll cleave, Chain Lightning, cleave, right? I'll Crash, Storm Strike, Chain Lightning. Again, it's the same rotation pretty much. You just don't have quite as much of a priority on Frost Shocking immediately. And to be honest, look at my Maelstrom weapon stacks. 5, 5, 5. It's because of the AoE of the Storm Strikes. So I'm actually wasting stacks right now. So this is actually an easier way to do AoE. I don't think it's going to be quite as satisfying, but I've seen it do well in Mythics as well. So I think this is another way. If you don't want a Hailstorm and you just want to cleave, definitely rock and roll this. And I think that the Forceful Winds is going to be, you know, pretty useful for you as well. So that's it. I mean, that's it. Those are the builds. That's the rotation. I hope this is helping. Again, same thing here. You want to focus on getting your melees out of the way, but this time focusing on Crash Lightning first, then Storm Strike, Lava Lash. And then you want to be making sure you don't cap your Maelstrom, and when you spend it, you Frost Shock afterwards to keep the momentum going, okay? And if you can't use a Frost Shock, you know, just keep pumping with the melees. I mean, I feel like in this build, I get so much Maelstrom generation. It's kind of like overwhelming because I'm at 10 already. I got to spend, got to crash. Oh, I got to crash. I Storm Strike once, I'm over cap. So you got to be a little bit careful, but I think this build is actually easier for people to get the hang of. And it's also, if you think about it, also good because this is also very similar to the AoE build. Sorry, to the single target build, right? You're using Elemental Assault, which increases that Storm Strike damage. So I think if you mix and match a few things, like maybe take Earthen Spike even for this situation, or you're taking LA Blast, or you're taking, you know, some combination of the first row and the last row, that might help you between the single target and the AoE. So I would recommend, you know, these are the builds that I would recommend. But let me know down in the comments which one you like the most. Do you like the Stormstrike AOE build, or do you like the Hailstorm AOE build? And then for single target, what is your build that you like the most? People are saying, why aren't you going to Sentence for AOE? 3-minute cooldown, snoozer. But let me know what your builds are for single target and AoE down below. Put the numbers of the talents and any tips and tricks you have for anybody. I'm only here to try to help people that have had questions about this. So definitely let me know what you think down below, guys. Let's keep helping people out. Let's keep helping, because the more shamans we help do better, the better the community perspective of our classes. That's the goal, guys. Let's get invited to Mythics. Let's get invited to Raid. Let's show them what we can do. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for the support on the stream and on the YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. We're going to keep going. Let me know what else you want to see down in the comments below. We'll be doing something similar for Ellie soon. That one will be a little bit more interesting, I think. But this is just core rotation, single target AoE. And I know 70% of you haven't subbed to the channel yet. If you do like this content, I encourage you, please sub to the channel, like the video, and we'll see you in the next one.